Hey everyone, it's Scott from buildable Design again, and part two of our request on building elevations and building sections. This video is going to give you a quick rundown of building sections, what I typically like to see in building sections, what makes a building section successful for the contractor, what makes it not successful, some things that make it look like an intended drawing and not just something thrown together out of Revit. Don't forget, building sections show spatial relationships between rooms and areas that are adjacent, next to, or even above and below each other. Things like elevators, shaft walls, large two-story spaces are really visualized a lot better in building section. So let's get started and we'll take a deeper dive into building sections and best practices. All right, everyone, let's get started on what makes a good building section. And when I say good building section, I don't mean my building section is better than your building section. What I mean is what makes a section successful and usable to the builder and to the contractor. And so here in Bluebeam, I'm just going to show you a couple examples of sections that I've done. This was a project I did back in 2010 for a small neighborhood center. And some things you're going to notice here is that first and foremost, we've got our main volumes identified in this building section. We're showing how these floors, these areas, not only stack, but sit next to each other. Is we want to see our level elevation datums off to the left here. That's critical. And you can sometimes, if you would like to show the vertical dimension between them, I've done a lot of sections that don't have this dimension string on the left, but showing the locations of these floors is really, really important. The second thing you'll want to show, if possible, if your building has them, are structural grids. It's up to you whether you want the grid to continue all the way through from top all the way down to bottom, or whether you want them to stop short. Same thing with your levels. So, but you'll want to see these grids because these grids will identify and hopefully help you create wall sections, which is the next portion of the set we're going to talk about coming up. So we've got our levels, we've got our vertical grids. We've also got sections cut through the building. I've worked at a couple different firms where the thought process on wall sections was different. Some firms like to call wall sections out from the floor plans, which is totally fine. I personally prefer to call wall sections out from building sections unless there's a unique wall section and plan that we can't really get from a building section. But overall, your building section should show wall sections as clearly as possible. And one rule of thumb is that every wall that's an exterior wall in your building section should have some kind of call out. I'm seeing right off the bat that this older set that I did should have had this entire wall called out. I think what was happening was they were trying to identify how this sloped insulated roof merged with the lower part of this wall. But what I would have liked to have seen is for this wall call out to extend all the way up, preferably all the way up to this area here. Another thing you're going to want to make sure that you put in your building sections, and it's really important to me, is to show this earth pattern or something that indicates the ground in which the building sits on. If there's nothing here and this building is just floating in space, it's just bad form, people. It just doesn't, I mean, your building sits on a ground. It doesn't float in the air. So why would you not show something down here to indicate that this building is sitting in dirt? It can be this crosshatch pattern. It can be solid gray, solid black, whatever your firm or you prefer. But don't leave a building section with white all the way around it. It just doesn't look good. I also like to make sure my building sections have room tags. That way you can identify volume relationships, spatial relationships between floors, as well as the rooms that are adjacent to each other on the same level or similar levels. So for example, you can see very clearly that this elevator goes all the way to the top. You can also see the relationship between the break room, the counseling room, and the lobby, and even down to the details of showing bat insulation in these walls to indicate, even though it's not an exterior wall, you're putting acoustical bat in there to keep voices from traveling between spaces. One question I get a lot in building section is, where do I place my section in plan? And the answer to that is you place building sections where they're going to do the most good. That sounds a little simplistic, but it's very true. If I were to cut a building section such as this one, and then I were to put another section just a few feet away that cut through the same thing, that's a duplicate section that we don't really need For example, here's another section going the other direction that's cut perpendicular to the one we were just looking at. This one also indicates a lot of the roof and floor assemblies as typical. So you have an upper roof construction, and here's all the components that are made up of that. Here's an exterior wall construction, second floor, first floor, and foundation. And then also what's really important here is showing these distant elements. Just by looking at this section, you realize it appears to have some kind of PV system, as well as this tower element in the background, which you wouldn't be able to see in plan, but maybe elevation. So here's another example of a building section showing in Bluebeam, but a lot of the same elements you're seeing here. You're seeing vertical datums, you're seeing horizontal grids across this space, you're seeing callouts for important areas. I would have liked to have seen callouts for some of these kind of overhead stem walls, these parapet walls. This one has it, but this one was cut at an angle, which I can understand why I didn't put that one on here. But again, room names are labeled, and what you're really seeing that's very noticeable here is this enormous reception and waiting volume that has what looks to be a feature wall. Oh, I remember it was a wood wall here. This was an office building for a bank or credit union. So that's why this was here. But again, you're seeing the ground that this building is sitting on. You're seeing the vertical levels, the room names. One thing you'll notice in this building section is that instead of having construction shown, I mean, we are showing the corrugated metal deck in section here, but we've decided to blacken all of these. There's a thought process that when you have black building sections, it kind of indicates a schematic section. But in this set of final construction drawings, we actually did produce final drawings with blackened section cuts. And finally, here's another building section that I did recently for a construction office here in town. Here you're seeing the levels, again, the datums, the horizontal grids, section callouts for perpendicular sections, room tags labeled. And then this is also very important. You're seeing the tagging of individual floor and roof assemblies. RC was an indicator for roof construction. FA was floor assembly. And then you're seeing the room tags and their relationship horizontally as well as vertically of what that section looks like. This section went even a little further and actually showed the TJI wood joists in this floor in perpendicular. So you're seeing every joist. Up here, the joists ran horizontally, so you're seeing one continuous band of joist. But I prefer to see floor construction like this, and I prefer to see a lot of batt insulation. That way, someone without going into a wall section can instantly see how these are laid out, that this wall has insulation. It's got a couple windows. This wall has insulation. You've got a tapered insulated roof. So 3 really good examples of building sections that we're going to work from in our Revit demo. So now we're back into our project that we used for our elevations video. This is the Mountain Residence large 2-car garage with a carport, gear storage, and then a small mother-in-law suite, a small private residence attached to it. But they've already got some sections cut through here. And this, again, follows our rule that we want to cut sections through areas that are important. So if you look at this section vertically, you've got a living room, a dining room, and you're pointing the section to the right, which is not only going to capture all the cut elements such as this sink and casework here, this dining room table, as well as a couple large windows, but you're also going to catch this ornate fireplace. So let's just go to that section, and you can see here it's not as detailed as we would like. You're seeing the callouts that isn't quite complete on here. So you're seeing the windows with their tags. If we go back to our main plan, we've got another section cut through this bedroom space, bathroom space, and then this outdoor entry porch. So let's just go to this section. And once again, you can see something interesting here. Not only do we have bedrooms, hallways, and entry porch, but we do have an upper storage loft, which we would not have seen in plan, but this section very clearly shows that area. Now, this architect preferred to use a solid masking region for their base, which is fine. You could also use an earth shade here, but you're also seeing that there's a crawl space down here and an outdoor entry porch. But let's cut a new section from scratch and go to town on that. So we'll cut through this bathroom here. We'll do a section through the bedroom the toilet, the outdoor entry porch again. So let's just create similar because they already have a building sections view set up here. And we'll just create it from this point and bring it all the way down. Okay, first thing we want to do is make sure our section looks like other sections in the model. So the head appears to be correct, but the tail, we want to swap that out for the rounded tail. And then we'll use this dot, drag it up. And normally you would think if you get close to these, it would snap into place. Revit with sections has a small glitch where you actually have to pull your section way out past what you're trying to snap. And then you'll notice as the further away I get it, it kind of snaps to the sections to the left, which is odd, but that's how it works. So we just kind of have to float around here until it snaps into place. So we'll snap that one there. This one appears to already be snapped into place. Okay, so let's double click this section and see what we've got. Great. Now, here's our first problem. This is floating in space, which we want to fix quickly. So we'll speed through this kind of quickly. Let's align this section up here because I like to have my sections shown in this place. We'll align that there. I like to do a masking region. If you have a site or topography already defined, that's the better way to do it because every section you cut will be accurate. But this site model was a linked model. And so we're going to do this with a filled region. I'm going to use my fat, but not too fat, extra wide. And we're just going to assume that this slopes away from the building like so at about 5 degrees. Again, we're going to go outside our masking region. We're going to come around here. Now, because we're in a section, we're going to actually be a little bit more careful. This is a set of steps coming down. So we'll put that there. And then we're going to go around our foundation wall like this. We'll take it all the way across to this area. I'm not sure if this foundation is sloped or what. And then we'll finish up here. Let's double check. We're not sloping away from the building here. So we'll select these two. We'll drag this down so we have kind of a positive drainage away. And then when we hit the check mark, before we hit the check mark, let's make sure we have an earth pattern. Site earth and hit check mark. Okay, so that's starting to look a little better. The second thing I would do here is I would make sure my grid lines are accurate. And again, do a double check, make sure every level running through here has an association with it. And it looks like it does. We're seeing the footing, the 96 top of footing. Here's the footing it's calling out. Here's the garage slab. That one could be hidden. So in this case, because I'm not seeing the garage slab, I'm going to go ahead and hide it. And I use EH to turn that off. I do have two different floor levels, one for the top of the radiant floor heat. This is a 3-inch radiant floor. And then my main level. Now remember, if I select the bottom one and hit the elbow, it'll drop down, which will be cleaner. But I think I'd rather bring the top one up. So I'm going to break it, bring it up, and all the way to the left. Same thing on this side. Break it, bring it up, and all the way to the left. And it snaps with the other side. This one I'm just going to drop down because it's a top of plate, left. Same thing here, top of plate, break it, bring it to the left. Okay, now all my levels are readable. All my grids are in the right spot. So now we have a section here. Let's tag our rooms real quickly. So we have a bedroom, we have a closet. I try to keep all my room tags at the same elevation. And my upper storage. If this was bat insulation in these walls, we could draw bats. I bet these are 6-inch, so we'll do this as a 5.5-inch insulation width, and we'll bring our insulation up. Bring our insulation up. We're missing a wall here. We'd have to model that correctly later, but in order to get this looking right in the shorter amount of time, we'll leave that alone. But ideally, we'd have a wall with insulation coming up to the underside of this roof. Okay, so we're starting to get there. So here's spot slopes again. Let's go annotate spot slope. And notice this roof, there's something wrong with the way this was modeled. I believe it's catching a dormer edge here, but I know that this roof is 7 to 12. So I know that it's back in this space. So I'm gonna hit the tab key a few times until I catch that 7. There it is, 7 and 12. Sometimes you just have to play with Revit a little bit to get it. 7 and 12 here. So we've got 2 slopes indicated in this spot. If we wanted to, we could also spot slope the one in the distance, which is a 312. So we've got 2 there. So we've got our levels, we've got our grids, we've got our section callouts. I'm going to break this section, actually. We'll go up to here. Bring this one down here. I like these lines to be, always try to keep grid heads, section heads, ends of section lines, level heads, all lined up. It indicates intent of drawings that were put together well. If you put together a set of drawings where you've got section heads down here and you've got a grid head, you know, randomly over in this direction, it just shows that you didn't take the time to really put this together and intend for this drawing to look good. Clean things up, line up all your datum heads, line up your grid heads, make these drawings as much of a piece of art as you can. So finally, I would add tags for these floors. However, this architect is a residential architect and they don't use floor, wall, or roof tags. So what you could do in this case is just create keynotes and say roof assembly and then whatever the roof assembly is. Another thing you could do is say typical wall assembly. Typical floor assembly. We could actually put a text note on here for the crawl space, just to show that this is a crawl space that they're going to have to build. So let's re-edit our boundary. After looking at this, I'm realizing that this is infilled as a slab on grade, which will need a little bit more engineering in this space, but you get the idea of graphically how we want to show this. It's not the best. We would actually have this connected. This crawl space would go over to here, but that's more modeling that we're going to need to do. We missed some insulation here. And then we would probably have bats up in this cathedral space. And because it's blow-in insulation and we don't really have an annotation for blow-in insulation, we can just take these and make these larger. Let's make them, 8-inch insulation lines just to indicate that there is insulation in this space. The last thing I like to do on sections is I don't like to see all the background images with solid lines. I like my heaviest lines to be cut and black, and everything else behind it is a little gray. So I'm going to take this template off of here because I don't want to mess up the whole firm template. But what I will do is go to my graphic display options, and then I'm going to go to depth queuing. Now I'll do this in another video, but I'll show as well how I like to think of depth queuing. When I turn on show depth, this indicates that there is a transition between 0 feet and 100 feet or units, right? Percentage, whatever you want to think. I never have really been able to dial these in until I figured out that if I use the values of 3 and 5 here, that indicates that everything that's up front and cut is going to be solid black. Usually things don't extend more than a few feet past the cut plane. And then this second indicator is how much light or dark the background is going to be. So if I set this to 50% and hit apply, everything in the background is going to fade back to about a 50% value. If I make this really light, if I make this 25% or 20%, everything in the background becomes significantly lighter. But everything I've cut is still pretty dark and black. So I usually set this to about 25. And then you can see a lot of these elements behind as reference, just to indicate what the volume is going on and the spaces behind there. And there you have it. That's not a finished section. I would still want to run this by my project manager and see what other pieces are missing. We could call out elevations of eaves. We could call out more ridge heights. We could start calling out materials in section here. But this is a great way to start a section and get some information on a sheet. I hope this helps. Enjoy drawing your building sections. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again to everyone who has subscribed. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next video.